The wind was sharp that evening, carrying bits of snow that stung the face like tiny needles. The small town had already gone quiet. Most houses had their curtains drawn and warm lights glowing inside, while the streets outside lay silent under the weight of winter. It was the kind of night when no one wanted to be out longer than necessary. Inside her modest little house, at the edge of town, the woman was sipping warm tea, wrapped in a faded but cozy blanket. She had grown used to the loneliness. After her kids moved away, the house felt too big, but she had learned to live with the silence. Life in a small town was steady, simple, and predictable. That night, she thought it would be the same, quiet and uneventful. But as she set her cup down and glanced out the window, her heart skipped a beat. A motorcycle had pulled up near the road in front of her house. On the back, there was a woman clinging to the rider, and behind them, a small sidecar where two children huddled together under a thin jacket. The bike stopped, its headlights cutting through the dark for a moment before going out. The man climbed off slowly, as if his legs ached from the cold. He looked around, then back at his family. Something about the scene pulled at her heart. She pushed aside the curtain a little more. Their breath came out in thick clouds of white as they spoke to each other. The wind whipped against them, the little ones shivering as the woman from the sidecar tried to wrap them in her own coat. They looked like they had been riding for hours. Most people in town wouldn't have given them a second glance. Bikers carried a reputation here. Tough people with leather jackets, loud engines, and faces the cold seemed to carve out of stone. Folks assumed they were trouble before they ever said a word. But standing there, watching them in the freezing night, all the woman saw was a family tired, cold, and with nowhere to go. She didn't even realize she had opened the door until the wind pushed it back against her arm. "Hey," she called out, her voice carrying through the night. "Do you need some help?" The man turned sharply, cautious. His shoulders tensed as if he expected someone to yell at them to leave. We just need a place to warm up," he said, voice rough from the cold. "Just for a little while, we'll move on." The woman didn't hesitate. "Bring the kids inside. It's too cold out here." For a moment, they didn't move. Maybe they weren't used to kindness from strangers. Maybe they were wondering if it was a trick. But then the woman in the sidecar lifted the smallest child into her arms and nodded gratefully. Inside, the warmth hit them like a blessing. The children sat near the small heater, holding out their frozen hands, while the woman fetched thick blankets from the back room. The biker family didn't ask for much, just heat, maybe a little food, and a chance for the children to rest. She gave them all she could: warm soup from the stove, bread she had baked that morning, extra jackets she kept in the closet from when her own kids were small. The man kept thanking her softly, like he couldn't believe someone would open their door to people like them. His wife had tears in her eyes as she tucked the children under the blankets on the couch. Outside, the town stayed dark and still. No one knew, or maybe no one cared, what was happening inside the little house at the edge of the road. But for that family, it was everything. They ate quietly, the only sounds the wind rattling the windows and the children's small sighs of relief as warmth returned to their faces. After a while, the man spoke again. "We didn't mean to stop here," he said slowly. "The bike was running low on gas. Kids were freezing. We didn't know where else to go." "It doesn't matter," the woman said, shaking her head. "You needed help. That's enough." It was such a simple thing for her to say, but to them, it seemed to mean the world. Later, as the children drifted off to sleep under piles of blankets, the man offered to sleep on the floor. She wouldn't let him. She made up the old guest room instead. The night passed quietly after that. Snow piled higher against the windows while inside. The house felt warmer than it had in years, not because of the heater, but because of the life that had filled it. The woman didn't know what would come of it. She didn't know their names or where they were headed. All she knew was that when someone needed help, you gave it if you could. That was all that mattered. And so on a bitter winter night when most people had turned away, she had opened her door. What she didn't know was how much that one small act would change everything in the days to come. Asterisk. Morning light crept slowly across the small town, turning the blanket of snow into a shimmering sheet of silver. Inside the little house, it was warm and still. The only sounds were the faint crackle of the heater and the soft breathing of the children. Still wrapped in blankets on the couch, the woman stood quietly in the kitchen, brewing coffee. She didn't want to wake them. For a moment, she just looked at them, the biker's wife asleep on the edge of the couch, one arm draped protectively over the kids. The man had slept sitting in the chair near the door, as if ready to leave at any moment. They looked different now, not like people the town gossiped about. They didn't seem like bikers or strangers. They just looked like a family. A tired, struggling family who had been given a small moment of peace. The smell of coffee must have woken the man because soon he stirred, blinking against the sunlight. He didn't say much, just gave her a small nod of thanks. She smiled and poured him a cup. "There's bread on the counter. Help yourself," she said softly, not wanting to wake the kids. He hesitated before taking it, as if the simple kindness weighed heavy on him. "We can't thank you enough," he said after a long pause. His voice cracked slightly, like someone who wasn't used to asking for help. "People, they usually don't open doors for folks like us." The woman shrugged lightly. "People. Our people." You looked cold. Kids were freezing. "That's all I saw." He didn't answer right away, just stared into his coffee. Then he whispered, almost to himself, "We'll never forget this." When the children finally woke up, they ate, like they hadn't seen warm food in days. The smallest one smiled for the first time, and it made the woman's heart ache in a good way. After breakfast, the family began gathering their things. The woman insisted they take extra bread for the road, along with some old scarves and gloves she had in the closet. The biker's wife hugged her tightly before leaving. Her eyes were red, but there was a small smile on her face. "No one's ever done something like this for us," she whispered. The man simply said, "Thank you," again, his voice low but steady. Then they climbed onto the motorcycle. The children bundled up in the sidecar. The engine roared to life, sending echoes through the quiet morning. Neighbors peeked out of their windows as the bike rolled away, their faces filled with questions. Some shook their heads. Others whispered to each other. This was a small town. Nothing ever happened here without someone talking about it. By the time the woman stepped back inside her house, she already knew what they'd be saying. "Did you see? She had bikers in her house all night. Not just bikers, a whole family. Strangers. She better be careful. Folks like that bring trouble." But the woman didn't care. Let them talk. She had seen the way the children had smiled when they were warm, the way the man's shoulders had relaxed for the first time when he realized no one here was going to throw them back into the cold. That was enough for her. As the day went on, life returned to normal. The neighbors kept gossiping, but the woman ignored it. She cleaned the blankets, made fresh bread, and went about her day like always. That night, when the town was quiet again, she thought about the family. Where were they now? Did they find a warmer place to stay? Did they have food for the kids? She didn't know, but she remembered the man's words, "We'll never forget this." It was just one night of kindness, one open door on a freezing night. She didn't expect anything in return. What she didn't know was that the family truly meant what they said. They would not forget, and neither would the entire biker club. Days later, when the sound of dozens of motorcycles rolled into town, she and everyone else would realize just how much that simple act had meant. 3 days passed quietly. The small town went back to its usual rhythm, neighbors shoveling snow, kids walking to school in thick coats, the same gossiping voices drifting out from the diner on the corner. The woman stayed busy with her little Routines, morning coffee, cleaning the house, cooking simple meals for herself. Life had been the same for so long, but for some reason, she kept thinking about that family. She wondered if the kids were warm now, if they had enough to eat. She remembered the way the smallest one had smiled when he wrapped himself in the blanket she gave him. She remembered the wife's tearful hug, the man's promise, "We'll never forget this." The words stayed with her, but she didn't expect anything from them. People said things like that all the time. Life moved on. It was late afternoon on the fourth day when she first heard it. At first, it was faint, a low, distant rumble that made the windows tremble ever so slightly. She frowned, setting her teacup down, and listened. The sound grew louder. A deep, rolling thunder that seemed to come from the earth itself. Engines. Dozens of them. The woman walked to her front door, opening it slowly. Down the snowy road, she saw them. Motorcycles, one after another, rolling in tight formation, headlights cutting through the cold air. There weren't 3 or 4. There weren't even 10. There had to be at least 30, maybe 40 bikes. The sound was overwhelming now, filling the whole town with a deep growl of engines. Neighbors stepped out onto their porches. Shop owners paused in their doorways. Curtains twitched as people peeked out from behind them, whispering nervously. It wasn't every day this quiet little town saw a swarm of leather-clad bikers roaring through its streets. People didn't like it. You could see it on their faces, the suspicion, the fear. Some even pulled their kids inside, locking doors. The woman didn't move. She just stood there on her porch, her heart beating faster as the bikes slowed in front of her house. The engines cut off one by one, leaving behind an eerie silence. Dozens of men and women in heavy jackets climbed off their motorcycles. They didn't look angry, but they didn't smile either. Their boots crunched against the snow as they walked toward her house. The townsfolk were watching from every direction now. From the diner across the street, from the gas station on the corner, from behind half-closed blinds. No one knew what was about to happen. The woman gripped the railing of her porch, unsure herself. She hadn't seen the family since that night. Maybe something had happened to them. Maybe they were angry about something. Her breath caught as the crowd of bikers stopped at the edge of her yard. Then, from among them, the man from before stepped forward. His wife was beside him, holding the hands of their 2 children. The woman blinked in surprise. The kids were smiling this time, big, bright smiles. Their cheeks were pink from the cold, but they looked healthier, warmer. The wife's face carried no fear now, only gratitude. The man looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "We told you we wouldn't forget," he said, voice carrying across the silent street. The woman didn't know what to say. She just nodded back, her hands trembling slightly. Behind him, some of the bikers began unloading things from their bikes. Boxes, bags, even tools. The neighbors gasped. The woman just stood there, confused, as more and more gifts were carried toward her porch. Food, firewood, clothes, repairs. For the old house she lived in. It seemed the entire motorcycle club had shown up, not for trouble, but to repay kindness. The townspeople watched in stunned silence. For years they had whispered about bikers being nothing but trouble. But here they were, filling one woman's yard with more generosity than the whole town had ever shown her. It wasn't over yet. The woman stood frozen on her porch, watching as the bikers carried box after box into her yard. It didn't feel real. One moment, the street had been silent. The next, it was filled with the roar of engines, the crunch of boots on snow, and the quiet murmurs of townspeople watching from a distance. The man from the other night, the father, set down a heavy box of firewood on her porch. "You gave my kids warmth," he said simply. "Now it's our turn." She didn't know what to say. Her voice felt caught somewhere in her chest. I didn't do it for this," she finally whispered. He looked at her for a long moment, his weathered face softening. "We know," he said, That's why it matters. More bikers approached, some with bags of groceries, others with tools slung over their shoulders. A few began inspecting the loose shutters on her windows, the sagging front step, the fence leaning dangerously to one side. Without waiting for permission, they got to work like a well-organized team. One woman carried out a thick, brand-new winter coat and handed it to the old woman. "This is for you," she said with a small smile. "It gets cold out here." The woman's hands trembled as she accepted it. She couldn't remember the last time someone had given her something without expecting anything in return. The children from the biker family ran up the porch steps, grinning from ear to ear. "We brought you cookies," the little one shouted, holding up a tin wrapped in bright paper. She laughed despite the lump in her throat. "Cookies? For me?" The boy nodded fiercely. "Mama made them. We wanted to say thank you." The woman knelt down, hugging the child gently. Something warm spread through her chest. A few days ago, she had opened her door to a shivering family with nothing. Now here they were, standing in her yard, filling it with life and gratitude. But it wasn't just about the gifts. It was the way the bikers worked together, some fixing her broken porch steps, others stacking firewood neatly by the side of the house. A few sweeping snow off her roof like it was the most natural thing in the world. They weren't loud or rowdy like the townspeople expected. They weren't dangerous or careless. They moved with quiet respect, like this moment mattered to them. And all around, the neighbors kept watching, whispering to each other from behind fences and half-closed doors. "Are they fixing her house? Looks like it. Never thought I'd see the day." The woman heard every word, but she didn't care. Let them see. Let them finally understand. One of the bikers, a tall man with a kind smile, approached her holding a heavy envelope. "The guys pitched in," he said. "For groceries, bills, whatever you need." She shook her head quickly, overwhelmed. "No, I can't take money." "I didn't." But the man cut her off gently. "You gave shelter to a family you didn't. No, you gave warmth when no one else would. Let us do this." The envelope felt heavy in her hands. She tried to speak, but emotion caught her throat. She hadn't expected thanks. She hadn't expected anything at all. And yet here they were, dozens of bikers standing in her yard, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. By the time the sun began to sink, her yard looked transformed. A fresh stack of firewood stood by the wall. Her porch steps were sturdy again. Her roof was clear, the broken fence fixed. Groceries filled her kitchen table. It felt like a dream. The man who had first come to her door stepped forward again. His wife stood beside him, the children holding her hands. "We wanted you to know," he said slowly, "that kindness doesn't get forgotten, not by us." For a moment, the only sound was the wind moving softly through the trees. Then the engines roared back to life, one by one, until the whole yard shook with the sound. The bikers began climbing back onto their motorcycles, nodding respectfully toward the woman before turning toward the road. The townspeople stayed quiet, watching as the line of bikes rumbled away into the distance, their red taillights glowing against the snow. The woman stood there long after the sound faded, her hands still trembling, her heart so full it hurt. What had started as one cold night of kindness had just changed everything, her home, her town, and maybe even her life. And it wasn't over yet. The next morning, the whole town was talking. At the diner, where the smell of coffee and bacon drifted through the air. Neighbors crowded into booths, their voices buzzing with excitement. The woman heard her name again and again as she walked in for her usual cup of tea. They came back. The whole motorcycle club. One man said, his voice low but carrying enough for everyone to hear, "Fixed her house." "Two," another added, shaking his head in disbelief. "Never seen anything like it." "And groceries." "Did you hear about the groceries?" someone else whispered. "They filled her kitchen, brand new coat, firewood, cash for bills, everything." The woman sat at the counter quietly while the waitress poured her tea, but she could feel every eye on her. People who had judged her just days ago were now looking at her differently, as if they didn't quite know what to make of her anymore. Before all this, folks in town had called her soft-hearted, maybe even foolish. Some said she trusted too easily. Others just shook their heads when she opened her door to strangers. But now no one was saying a word against her. The waitress leaned in with a smile. "Never thought I'd see the day," she said softly. "A bunch of bikers making this town look bad for not helping sooner." The woman gave a small smile but didn't answer, because deep down, she knew it wasn't about the groceries or the repairs or even the money. It was about what kindness had started, something bigger than anyone expected. By the afternoon, word had spread even further. People from the edge of town came by her house just to see the repaired porch, the neat stack of firewood, the groceries lined up in her kitchen. Some came out of curiosity. Others came with sheepish looks on their faces, like they suddenly realized how quickly they had judged a family just because they rode motorcycles and looked rough around the edges. One neighbor, a man who had told her days ago to be careful about folks like that, stopped by carrying a small basket of apples. He didn't meet her eyes at first. "Thought maybe you could use these," he mumbled. The woman accepted them with a smile but said nothing. She didn't need to, because the truth was, it wasn't just the bikers who had changed something in this town. That night had changed people here too. For years, everyone had lived side by side but apart. Polite waves, small talk at the store, but no real closeness. And when strangers came through, folks locked their doors first and asked questions later. But after seeing what one act of kindness had set in motion, people began to look at each other differently. A few days later, someone left a bag of groceries on the doorstep of a struggling single mother across town. No note, no explanation. The following week, the local mechanic fixed the broken heater of an elderly couple for free. At the diner, a quiet man who usually ate alone started paying for the coffee of the person sitting next to him, just because. It was small things at first. Little acts of kindness spreading quietly, like ripples in a pond. And every time someone asked where it started, the answer was always the same. It began the night she opened her door. As for the biker family, they kept their promise. They visited from time to time, never empty-handed. Sometimes it was just to bring firewood before the first snow. Other times they came with gifts for no reason at all: homemade bread, new boots for winter, fresh vegetables from someone's garden. But what mattered most wasn't the gifts. It was the friendship that grew between them and the woman who had once been a stranger. On summer evenings, the roar of motorcycles no longer made the townspeople uneasy. Instead, it made children run to the windows with excitement, hoping to see the big bikes rumble past on their way to her house. Neighbors waved now. Some even brought pies or casseroles when the bikers came to visit, as if trying to make up for the way they had judged them before. The woman often stood on her porch, watching it all, her heart full. She never expected any of this when she opened her door on that freezing night. She just did what felt right, helping a family in need, because it was the human thing to do. But kindness has a way of growing. One door opens, one hand reaches out, and before you know it, a whole town begins to change. The woman never called herself a hero. She never wanted attention or praise. But years later, when people in that town talked about the day dozens of bikers roared in and filled one woman's yard with gifts, they always said the same thing: it started with one night of kindness.